Welcome aboard the Athletics Can't Wait Jets podcast, your nonstop shop for all things Jets with Tim McMaster, Zach Rosenblatt, and Marissa Dunn.
Can't wait.
It's Hackett Payton week, everybody. A chance to look back on the summer's former head coach crime that occurred between the Broncos and the Jets. I'm Tim McMaster, along with the Athletics Jets reporter, Zach Rosenblatt. Our Broncos reporter at the Athletic, Nick Kosmider, is going to join us as well. He's going to talk about Sean Payton and this whole mess, of course, Hackett last year when he was covering the Broncos as well. So a lot of fun. We also have a guest on for our picks portion of the show that'll come at the end. So lock in and give that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up, all the good stuff here on the podcast. Also, one note, programming note, other than what I'm going to do right now, we are not going to mention Taylor Swift at all, Zach. That's it. No Taylor Swift. How are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, it'll be our first podcast we go without talking too much about that. But yeah, I'm doing good. As you guys know, last week my girlfriend moved in, so been adjusting to life, not living alone anymore. It's been going great so far.
All right, that's good.
We're learning each other's like pet peeves and stuff. Like she gets annoyed by like people leaving dishes in the sink, and she does this thing where she's always turning off the lights in whatever room she's leaving, and it always annoys me so much. She's like trying to save electricity and stuff, but I have a dog in the house, so she's not used to that. But anyway, it's been great. We saw John.
We should make this an ongoing segment.
Yeah.
Podcast,
Update.
By the way. Yeah.
She'd love it.
And proof that I'm still not good at StreamYard and running this thing without Marissa around. Everybody just got to see Nick at the beginning of the show because I forgot to put him backstage until we go to him in a little bit. So that was the visual teaser.
I didn't want to embarrass you.
To go with everything else. Oh, man. All right, let's jump into things. We'll do some news and notes before we get to the game itself. And some significant news to start things off. DJ Reed, of course, has been in the concussion protocol. He is not going to be ready to go. Robert Saleh saying that this morning. So DJ Reed out. Obviously a big deal, Zach. We talk a lot about the two cornerbacks on this team and how they can both shut things down. So how did the Jets go about filling that hole on one side and shuffling things around in the secondary?
I mean, beyond Reed being out, they also don't have Brandon Echols, and one of the big reasons Echols is still here because they view him as a starting caliber corner who can fill in when a guy gets hurt, and he's out because he hurt his hamstring the other day. So, Saleh kind of avoided questions specifically about Breece Hall stepping in. Like logically, he's the obvious one. I feel like they're more likely going to do some shuffling. I don't know if that means Michael Carter II playing outside, which he's never done. They drafted him to play nickel. I don't know if he's never done. He probably did that in college a little bit, I imagine. I'd have to go back and look at his snap count, but I don't know. I don't know what the solution. I think what probably will happen, if I had to guess, is maybe Sauce and Michael Carter are the base corners. Maybe Breece Hall comes in and they slide Michael over to the slot sometimes, and I think they do a lot of three safety looks. Probably it is an issue. Like for all the and we'll get into the Broncos more deeply, but they do have some talented receivers. They have Jerry Jeudy. They have Cortland Sutton. I think they have someone else I'm forgetting that's not bad either, but so it's not going to be an easy challenge, and the Broncos are going to look to exploit whatever side of the field Sauce Gardner is not on, I imagine. And this is a big loss. We've talked a lot about DJ Reed on the show. I think this fan base knows how good he is. He's underrated because of Sauce being on the other side, but he's going to go down, as long as the season keeps going as he gets started out. He's going to go down as one of the best free agent signings in team history. Like I think he's way outplayed his contract. So this is a big loss. I'm sure the Broncos are happy to hear it, but so they need to step up. I think the biggest thing, they need to get more pressure up front. I think that's going to be the biggest thing to keep an eye on, is if Marvin Mims, the rookie, he's been good for them. If they don't get the pressure up front, it could be a long day, especially because the Jets had a hard enough time in the middle of the field stopping those quick passes. And if you have to move Michael Carter to the outside, then you have somebody else playing the nickel, probably a safety, I imagine, maybe Tony Adams or Adrian Amos, or I don't know. And it's just not ideal all around. So I don't know exactly what the solution is. I don't think it's necessarily going to be a positive. We're going to find out really what Michael Carter's made of if they move him to the outside, because he is a little undersized. I think he's a very good corner. So I'm curious to see how creative they get, and if they start doing more exotic pass rush moves, because they usually just do the 4-man rush, and it has worked in the past, but so far teams have been able to counteract it with quick passing.
I mean, there was a time when during his rookie season, everybody thought Breece Hall was going to be a legitimate starting cornerback in the NFL. And then like coaching change and other players brought in, and he kind of got shoved to the back. But hey, here's your chance, right? It's the NFL. You get your shot. We'll see what it can do. So we'll see if Breece Hall gets some good time to do that. All right. The other Hall, speaking of Halls, Breece Hall, no longer on a pitch count, which I know this was, I feel like on Twitter, the fan base was like, was the pitch count 6 anyway? You know what I mean? He's not on a pitch count anymore, but it's not like you were holding him back at a pitch count. You weren't using him basically at all the last few weeks when you should have been. So how much do you think Breece Hall's usage does increase now that they are actually saying that the pitch count, and I hate using that baseball term for football.
Yeah, I know. People get mad at me even when I say it, but it's how they're saying it. So.
But they say it. Yeah, we're quoting the team. Yeah. So what do you think? Are we going to see 15 to 20 carries from Breece Hall?
I mean, I hope so. I will say, like, the part of the quote that's been going around has been the part where he said there's no more pitch count. The part of the quote that wasn't going around was the very next line where Saw was like, but we also need to get a lot of guys the ball. So, and
I hope that means Garrett Wilson, right? Yes, a lot of guys. But
he talked about Dalvin Cook. He talked about Dalvin Cook needing the ball more, which I know fans were. That's the thing. The funny thing is, and I'll get into your direct question, but between him and Ulbrich, like, we asked about specific guys not playing much. It's like they keep saying like 9 different guys need more snaps and more touches, but the reality is not all of them can get it. So, but yeah, with Breece, it is kind of perfect timing that he's full go when he's about to go to the place where he suffered the torn ACL. That's just like so poetic. And I don't know if the Jets are doing that on purpose or what, or just kind of like timed out that way. But, he had a huge run against the Broncos last year. He was about to break out, hurt his knee. He's starting to look like the old Breece. I don't know if the GPS necessarily says if he's as fast as he was last year. It seems like he is. But yeah, you need, whether it's 15 touches, 12, whatever it is, it can't be 6 ever again. Like, there not be a game where they give Breece Hall 6 touches. Like, I know 2 weeks he had, I think it was like 12 and he only had 18 yards, which obviously isn't great, but you keep giving him the ball because any one of those touches could break for a touchdown. That's how talented he is. So if they go another game where he is kind of splitting the workload with Dalvin Cook, I think there might be a riot in New York. So.
Well, but according to the GPS, according to Robert Saleh, Dalvin Cook's looking better too, right? And getting his legs under him. I don't know. There's the GPS and then there's the eye test. So we'll see about that.
The GPS in my eyes says he's going slow, is what I would say.
Let's jump over to the other side of the ball. Jeff Ulbrich saying this week that Carl Lawson will play more as he gets up to speed. And he referenced the fact that he did miss a month this summer with the injury. And that's the reason he hasn't really been playing. So we'll talk about that. And then there's Bryce Huff also, which we need to discuss. But first with Lawson, are you buying that? Are you buying that the snaps are going to come for him, or is this just a numbers game? Because if Bryce Huff's going to get more snaps, how does Carl Lawson get more snaps?
Yeah, that kind of goes back to my original point about them saying everybody's going to play, because Ulbrich also is hyping up that he thinks Bryce Huff can be a 4-down player. Now the whole thing with him was always he's just a pass rush specialist. I mean, Huff was dominant last week. You can't really keep him off the field too much. So yeah, I think the part of Ulbrich's answer, again, like at the beginning part of his answer, he was focusing on Jermaine Johnson having earned his role and how they need to play all these guys. And it's hard to get the snaps. And then he finally got to the part where, like, also Carl missed a month. He has been slow to come back. Like, it's just been kind of sad, honestly, watching the decline. Because at the beginning of training camp, Carl Lawson looked physically, I mean, he always looks physically freakish, but he looked ready, like, to break out. I thought he was better than fans give him credit for last year while playing hurt. And now he doesn't really look very good out there when he's out there, and he's not playing very much. And I don't really know what the future holds for him. Maybe they trade him one day. I don't know. Bryce Huff is in the last year of his contract, as a lot of fans have been pointing out. Yeah, I just feel like the trio of JFM, Bryce Huff, and Jermaine Johnson should be the ones mostly on the field, because JFM's the best of both worlds, running and passing. Jermaine's been probably the best run stopper out of that 3. And Bryce Huff's been the best pass rusher. So that trio needs to play a lot. And that'll probably come at the expense of Carl, who, if he's healthy, I still think he's a good player, but I don't really know what the role is for him anymore. It's kind of they're in a tough spot there. And it's almost confusing in retrospect, looking back last week, that they had Al Woods inactive and they had Carl Lawson active, when Al Woods brings a lot in the running game and Carl Lawson's not really bringing a lot of anything right now.
I actually had a question as far as Al Woods goes from Franco in the chat. Said, will he be active this week?
I mean, I don't see why he wouldn't, but I was surprised last week. Will McDonald has played a little bit, hasn't really shown a lot. Carl Lawson has played a little bit and hasn't shown a lot. So if anybody would be inactive for those guys, maybe them. And they do have more injured guys. DJ Reed and Breece Hall are both going to be inactive, so that kind of like takes 2 inactive spots. I'm sure they'll call up like a practice squad corner or something, but yeah, I would guess Al Woods would be active this week.
How about an extension for Huff? You mentioned the fan base. Is that like a legitimate thing where they're going to try to do that before we get to his free agency?
Well, if they're genuine in what they're saying that they think he can be a 4-down guy, you're making his value go up just by saying that anyway. Yeah, I think they should. I mean, he's young. He's 25 years old, I believe.
Right.
He's gotten better every year he's been in the NFL. People have pointed to the JFM deal. He was a guy that they claimed on waivers, but they signed him to a deal during the season. The longer you wait, the more Breece Hall is going to make a lot of money in free agency if he gets there. Like pass rushers are at a premium. Like he'll make over $10 million a year, I think. So I would get ahead of it. I think these are the kind of players you want to keep in the building, the homegrown guys, the young guys. Get them while you can get them still cheaper than when they have like other teams to negotiate against. And so maybe Breece Hall wants to go somewhere where he can play every snap or whatever. But yeah, I would. I don't know if there's any movement to do it or not, but I think they absolutely should before the end of the year.
The other thing with him is I feel like he's one of like the diamonds for Joe Douglas, right?
Totally.
Like here's a guy that Joe Douglas can point to and be like, because it's mixed, right? He's had obviously the tremendous draft a year ago, but then some drafts that haven't been as good. But then you have a guy like Breece Huff who he found. I feel like you want to keep that guy around so you can kind of keep pointing to him. Like, look at that guy. I found that guy. He's one of the guys we've developed. So it'll be interesting to see. All right. Well, I think we've delayed the Hackett conversation enough. So let's get into that. We're going to start with some sound from Hackett this week, who genuinely, I thought, just seemed uncomfortable talking about the Sean Payton situation on Thursday. So let's hear a snippet of Hackett talking about all of that fun stuff that went down this summer.
Hey, what are your emotions on going back to Denver?
Got to go win a football game.
How did they treat you there?
Great.
In the 2 months since Payton's comments came out, what kind of support have you gotten from the people around you, like your players, other coaches here, people around the league? What kind of feedback, support have you gotten?
It's been great. It's been great. I think that for all of us, our sole focus is on winning a football game. We got to get better on offense, and we got to do our part to be able to score more points.
So are you able to compartmentalize that? I mean, because obviously that's going to be the topic of conversation, even on TV during the broadcast. They're going to be talking about those comments. And how do you do that?
I mean, that's how this game is. As a coach, in every single thing we do, you can only control what you can control. And for me, I can control trying to get these guys in the best position to go beat the Denver Broncos.
Did you ever talk to him? Like at
No.
the time, he said he never.
Nope.
Did he reach out, or you didn't accept the call, or?
Nope.
All right, and with that, we welcome in Nick Kosmider, our Broncos reporter here at The Athletic. Nick, thanks for joining us. Everybody gets to see you briefly at the beginning of the show, but thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, glad I wasn't doing something too weird. Thanks for having me, guys. I have had a couple lattes, so I can't be held responsible for what I say or who I excoriate while I'm here with you guys. So just a fair heads up.
Were they iced or hot lattes? That's an important topic on this podcast.
Yeah, they were hot. Only way to do it: come in hot, go out hot. I'm
an ice guy. So
are you? Okay.
Nice today for you.
There you go. We're nice podcast.
Just in case everybody forgot or was, had their head in the sand back this summer. I mean, Payton said a lot in that interview, but the thing I think that always grabbed the headlines was one of the worst coaching jobs in the history of the NFL. Nick, you were there for Nathaniel Hackett. So I think we should start there, covering that team. He didn't make it to the end of the season. It obviously was terrible and spiraled out of control and all that. But, when did it go wrong last year for Nathaniel Hackett? Like when you were covering that team, was there a moment when you were like, this guy's not ready to be a head coach in the NFL, or this is never going to get better?
Well, there was a giant red flag or maroon flag, whatever shade you want to say, in week 1, right? They go up to Seattle in that season opener. Russell Wilson is returning to the place where he had played his first 10 seasons, the hostile environment. It's a game that obviously means a lot to him. And Nathaniel Hackett decides on a 4th and 5 from the Seattle 46-yard line with about 2 minutes to go in the game, the Broncos trailing by 1, to trot out Brandon McManus for a 64-yard field goal instead of going for it on 4th and 5. And it wasn't just the decision, but just sort of his kind of inability to really characterize why he made that choice, what the issue, what the considerations were, that really was alarming. And then somebody had called me, kind of close to the team, like the next day, and asked me, is Nathaniel going to survive this? And that was surprising. I mean, it just sort of gave you that early like antenna up of like, hey, this thing is already sort of off kilter, and just didn't really get better from there.
I was like looking at, just like going through some of the headlines from his tenure last year, and like seeing like the progression of how quickly it got. Like I saw there was a column, I think in the Denver paper, where somebody was like, Russell Wilson finally took the wheel of the clown car from Nathaniel Hackett, because there was like a week where Russell Wilson like took over in the 4th quarter or something. But yeah, I remember a lot was made of the late game decisions he was making, and they went and hired Jerry Rosburg, and then he gave up play calling later in the year. What was, when you beyond the late game issues, what was the biggest issue you found with the play calling last year? Because obviously he had a big role in that.
Yeah, I think what happened, and this was not all on Nathaniel Hackett, but when they got Russell Wilson, it was sort of this immediate acquiescence to him, right? To this guy that was supposed to come in and save the franchise. And in some of the things that Sean Payton said in that interview, that was the thing that sort of stuck out to me. That was a big talking point in Denver a year ago, was, Russell Wilson comes in and there's all this talk about how this offense is a partnership. But Russell Wilson had made it clear that he wanted to, sort of be this drop back passer and throw the ball from the pocket, 35 times a game and all that kind of stuff. And it just didn't fit who he was at all. And there was just not enough. There were not enough safety valves on a lot of the routes they had. They had a lot of long developing stuff that, again, they didn't have the personnel to protect for. And it just sort of got out of hand. And it got to the point where the battering that Russell Wilson took, I mean, he was sacked 55 times in 15 games. It started to clearly affect his confidence. He started, dancing in the pocket, getting happy feet, and then that condensed the playbook, and it just sort of fed on itself, this issue where they didn't have enough in the playbook that would properly protect him. And there wasn't enough control from Nathaniel Hackett to say, no, this is what we're doing. This is madness. We're gonna do something that just fits a lot better what your skill set is right now and the personnel that we have right now. So it was just a clunky fit between what the Broncos actually had and what they were trying to call.
I mean, that sounds,
Broncos.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was gonna say that sounds familiar in some ways to the kind of how the Jets handed over everything to Rodgers, but obviously they had their relationship, so it was a little different.
Yeah.
Or you about to say, Tim?
I was going to say that, Wilson, his numbers are better this year. Obviously, the team is struggling. They finally got a win last week, but a couple 300-yard games. I think 3 of the 4 games, his rating's been over 100. Does he seem different now? Does he seem like the old Russell Wilson that we remember back in Seattle? Or are you still seeing the same kind of ugly stuff at times that we saw from him last year?
Yeah, I think it's largely been improved quite a lot with Russell Wilson. Speaking just specifically to that element of where the Broncos are at right now. Again, just it's more coherent in terms of his skill set and what they have around him. It's funny, the Broncos are actually allowing pressure at a higher rate this year than they did a year ago. But the sack rate is way down, and that's because some of this is almost designed pressure allowed, so to speak, and that there's a lot more screen action. There's a lot more, quick passing game than there was a year ago. And so there's a lot more outlets to the inevitable pressure that they're going to allow. And Russell Wilson, I think, has fit really well within that scheme. It has not been perfect. First 3 weeks, especially, there were some real struggles in the red zone. But by and large, he looks a lot like he did, not necessarily in his, 2016, 2017 era where he was one of the very best quarterbacks in the NFL, but certainly, 2019, 2020 Russell Wilson, where you still knew you were getting a quarterback who was going to put up big numbers, who was going to keep you in games. I thought last week the Broncos are down 28-7, and he played his best football since he got here in Denver. Just, really confident, big plays with his arm, command of the line of scrimmage. Just looked really solid. And I think they're only going to kind of continue to get better as he gets more familiar with what Sean Payton's doing.
And I'm curious what you think about this. Like in the transit, like Hackett obviously has his coaching style, which is well known. It's all about being loose, and he has that quirky personality, which I feel like if it works, then everybody's kind of loving it. And if it's not, which is probably what happened in Denver last year, like that he's not really connecting with those guys. Like how do you feel like it's gone in terms of the transition from that personality, kind of like the more hard-nosed approach that it seemed like Sean carries?
Yeah, I think for Russell Wilson, it's worked well. I think it helps that he's had sort of this long professed admiration for Sean Payton as a coach and as a play caller. It's been no secret that he has wanted to play for Sean Payton for a long time, and so I think that sort of helped. That gave them a little bit of a foundation. There was some mutual respect there. I think for some of the rest of the team, it definitely has been an adjustment, right? And Sean Payton comes in with all this experience, 152 regular season wins in his 15 seasons coaching the Saints, Super Bowl and all that kind of stuff. But it's been a pretty stark departure from what the Broncos dealt with, not just under Nathaniel Hackett, but even Vic Fangio, who is, he's known as an old school coach, but I think, not to the degree in terms of just, kind of the fire and brimstone that you get from Sean Payton. So that has been an adjustment. He drove them really hard after that 70-20 loss to the Dolphins in a way we really haven't seen. So it's been an adjustment for this team, but it's been interesting. Some of the things that Sean Payton, complained about the 2022 Broncos in that article with USA Today have continued to pop up with this team, right? Like the pre-snap stuff is an issue. They had 5 false start penalties. I was right. They're down 28-7. I'm writing this column, getting ready to write this column after the game that, hey, things aren't going well for Nathaniel Hackett. He lost his BFF on the 4th play of the game. He now has Zach Wilson, who until Sunday had not looked like a viable NFL quarterback. Things aren't great, but at least he's going to arrive in Denver with this comforting thought in his head of, hey, Sean Payton, I might have had one of the worst coaching jobs in NFL history, but what do you call 0-4 with a 50-point loss on your ledger and, and all these other issues. And, of course they come back, they get in the win column, and that's the NFL guys, right? Like that's how quickly sort of the narrative changes. But I would not say that all is fixed in Denver.
Yeah. Well, so jumping off that, so like obviously the numbers are bloated by that disaster against the Dolphins, but so I feel like from the Jets side, especially the fan base, but like they feel like this should be a week for the offense to like take the next step and keep playing like they did against the Chiefs. Like what would you say has been the biggest issue on defense? Because last year obviously like going into the year and even during the year, it was like their defense is amazing, but their offense cannot like keep up with it, which is kind of the Jets storyline the last 2 years. But like what's been the biggest issue on defense?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's been a number of things. I think that they've had some tough injuries early on, like Justin Simmons not being available for that Dolphins loss, and then again again in Chicago didn't play either, and he got hurt right at the end of the first half in week 2 against the Commanders and wasn't quite himself in that second half. So that's been a big one. He's such a central part of what they do defensively. But I also just think that they're doing a really poor job fitting the run. They gave up 350 rushing yards to the Dolphins, but then turned around and gave up 171 to a Bears team that hadn't showed much life on the ground to that point. And so that there's been issues there. They've had injuries in other parts of the defense as well. Zach Allen is a guy that went out and spent a lot of money on in free agency, had played with Vance Joseph in Arizona for 4 years. Haven't quite gotten that impact from him as a guy that disrupts in the backfield, gets a lot of tackles for loss. So again, it's been injuries, it's been guys shuffling in and out, but I think more than that, they just have not been on the same page with what they're trying to do. Interestingly, I would think that that's a fair thought for Jets fans to have. I mean, the Bears got right. Looks like they used that confidence from the Broncos game, and we saw what they did last night against the Commanders. But it will be interesting. Like they know this offense that Nathaniel Hackett runs. I think Josie Jewell said, the linebacker said, I can't really tell the difference from what they did in Denver a year ago. And also ironic in that Sean Payton had called that film hard to watch back at owners meetings, and he had to sit back through it this week to
that's a great point
during his role in whatever those defensive meetings were. So but we'll see. But the defense, they sort of found themselves a little bit in the second half against the Bears, but they have by no means figured everything out. And so this is another big one for them to have an opportunity against an offense that largely has struggled this year to see if they can fix some of their issues.
So here, I think for all the optimism, the Jets seem like it's a very happy locker room considering they're 1-3 right now. But I feel like, and I think most people agree around here, that this is like a very fork in the road game for them, because if they lose this, it could like go off like you lose to a team like the Broncos, are supposedly one of the worst in the league. It could go terrible. Like, is it kind of the same in Denver because they barely beat the Bears, obviously got killed by the Dolphins? Like, is it kind of a feeling of, man, we really need this one?
100%.
Yeah.
And part of the reason is because of where they've been to this point in the season. They dropped 2 very winnable home games to start the year, lost to the Raiders by 1, lost to the Commanders by 2. So they put themselves way behind the 8 ball because of those losses. Like, going to Miami in September was always going to be hard. You don't think you're going to lose by 50, but actually just losing the game, it wasn't the end of the world. And then, you go and you beat Chicago, although much tougher than it probably should have been. But what makes this more pivotal this week is that after Sunday's game, they faced the Chiefs twice in 16 or 17 days. So that's tough. They have the Packers sandwiched in between, a home game with the Packers sandwiched in between. But then after the second game against the Chiefs, they have a bye, and then they go to play Buffalo on a Monday night. So this schedule after Sunday is absolutely brutal. And if they have any hope of digging out of their 0-3 hole, like, getting a win against the Jets is a have to. Like, there's no path. Their playoff odds are already meager, but there is no path if they lose this game on Sunday.
I was gonna say, it's kind of funny to think about where we were in July when the Sean Payton stuff happened, where everybody's talking like, "Ooh, maybe this will be a game they flex because Aaron Rodgers in the storyline, and these two teams should be better this year," and all this stuff. And now we're here where we're like, the season might be over if they lose this game.
Well, I'm curious too about, like, we know, I didn't really expect much different to hear from Nathaniel Hackett on Thursday morning, but what has been sort of the locker room reaction about that? Like, is it the offensive players on that team looking forward to trying to help him, kind of put up a big number as he goes back?
I would say most of them, it seems, were instructed to not say anything because they've been very deflective about it. Connor McGovern, their center, said to a couple reporters, I wasn't there, but he said that they did him dirty about Hackett last year. Like, I don't remember the full quote, but I think he was kind of like honest about how he want to go and kill them for Nate. And I'm sure guys are talking about it a little bit. Yeah. But the deflection is more be like, we want to have a good game because we need to have a good game, less about like the Payton stuff. And even back when it happened, like, the only people that were vocal about it were obviously Aaron Rodgers. I mean, all guys that were with him in Green Bay. Randall Cobb had a comment about him. Billy Turner posted on Instagram about him. And Hackett himself, like, even with that was like the most open he's been because he came right out in his press conference and said all that stuff. But yeah, I'd say to the Jets' credit, because historically they're not good about not giving the other team bulletin board material. They've been good about not saying anything this week.
Yeah.
You're on mute, Tim.
Man, oh man. Speaking of that, Nick, when a week ago, the media in Kansas City asked Willie Gay about Zach Wilson, and he kind of had the pause and the laugh, and it was really when things were bleak for Zach. But then after the game, all the Chiefs came out of the woodwork to praise how great he was, and he's on his way to. You would have thought he was on his way to becoming a Hall of Fame quarterback by listening to the Chiefs after the game. I'm curious, was there a lot of questioning of the Broncos players about what they think of Zach Wilson this week, and how did they handle it?
Yeah, there was, and it was sort of the same thing, like effusive in their praise for Zach Wilson. I think, Vance Joseph yesterday was talking about like he was the number 2 pick for a reason. He has, he has all the arm talent in the world, and yeah, they certainly gloss over any of the part where he again didn't look like just didn't look like a viable quarterback through the first 3 weeks of the season. But yeah, some of that same kind of thing, right? Like not giving them any other reason to, to want to come in here and show anything. But again, part of it though is this defense again doesn't have any room to stand on to really, turn their nose up at anybody at this point in the season, given just how bad they have been. I think it's a good matchup for them, especially given the familiarity with Nathaniel Hackett. But you don't take anything for granted with this defense until they start putting something together consistently.
I will say before we let you go, there's one of the Jets reporters kind of pointed this out when asking Salah a question. I think it's crazy. The Jets are going to be playing in Denver, I think 3 straight years, and it's going to be against a different head coach each time, which is like wild. First of all, the fact that they've played the Broncos this many years in a row is crazy, but like the turnover is just like it's just like a good perspective of like these two teams.
Yeah, and it's obviously they have that that last place in the division thing kind of keeps
right
hitting them against one another. Obviously the Jets have the longest active postseason drought in the NFL, and the Broncos are just right there behind them. So these have been 2 teams that have been in that kind of downward trajectory for a while, and both hopeful going into the season that it was going to turn around. But obviously the one who loses this game for sure is headed straight toward another season on that streak.
Yeah, it's a big game for both. All right, Nick, thanks so much for coming on, man. We appreciate it. Enjoy the game.
Yeah,
thanks, Nick.
Take care.
All right. And it's funny you said about Denver and their long drought from the playoffs as well. I was talking to him before you jumped on, Zach, before the podcast, and I covered the Broncos kind of from a distance early in my career. I was out in Rapid City, South Dakota, and they were like the closest NFL team. It was like a 6-hour drive. So we would go for like a few days of training camp, and I would show highlights and that stuff. It was, local sports. And at that time, like Elway had just kind of finished up, right? So they were moving on to Greasy, but they were building the brand new stadium. They had just won multiple Super Bowls. They were kind of the gold standard in the NFL. The ownership group was considered, Pat Bowlen was considered like one of the best ownership groups because of how much they cared about the team. And it was all this like, this is how you do it. This is how to be a great NFL franchise. And it's wild now, many years later, that they're on the other end of the spectrum. Although I think with the new ownership group, they'll probably end up being back.
I remember growing up, Broncos were always a team you took seriously every year for sure. Even after Elway with Grease and Peyton Manning briefly, like they were always a team that it seemed like always had like a bunch of talent. And I can't even remember the last time I remember even thinking, but like I thought going into last year they were going to be good, to be honest. But I can't remember. Like they just feel like they've been out of sight, out of mind for a while now. Whereas like the Jets' misery has been like very public and everybody knows about it. I feel like the Broncos have kind of like they were kind of behind the scenes bad until last year's disaster.
Yeah, it's like because the history is so bright that you still think of them that way, right? Like it's like if the Patriots, now that Brady's gone, are terrible for the next 10 years, which is very possible. Yeah. You'll still think of them as the Patriots, I think, for a while because of.
Well, I think that's why every year everybody's like, they'll turn it around. I feel like that's finally started to shift where I don't think people think they're going to turn it around this year. Like Belichick has kind of like not worn out his welcome, but I feel like there's as much negativity going at Bill as there's ever been, which is, and you eventually get there if you lose long enough.
Yeah, everybody. I mean, he will always be considered,
the best ever,
all the best ever, all that stuff. But it's also like you're the best ever, but it's time for something new.
Yeah. I feel like
The way
maybe
people look at
I
it.
feel like he's brought a little too many of his Patriots buddies back to his staff, which has helped it go downhill. But this isn't a Patriots pod, so
Yeah. All right. Should we do some picks? Check in
Yeah.
on the
Yeah, let's
picks.
do
We
it.
have a guest coming on this week to talk about the picks a little bit. Welcome in, Gurman Chatwall. I got that right? After I butchered one of our actual coworkers' names. Gurman, thanks so much for coming on, man. We appreciate it.
Yeah, you're killing it.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Hey,
So I'm just going to share why we're having you on here. If I can move a little bit around.
I
here.
forgot to put in my Thursday pick last night. I was very upset about that. I think I was going to pick the Bears too.
I didn't pick the Bears. So, but here we go. Top of the standings. And it's funny, Gurman, we talked about it last week on the show. There was like 5 people tied for first.
Yes.
And we said, once there's some separation, we want to start getting some people on the show, whether they had a great week or overall leaders. And you look at this and it's kind of a combination of both for you. You've actually been the leader 2 weeks, or tied for the lead 2 of the 4 weeks so far. And now you have a 3-point lead overall at the top of the standings. Congratulations.
Thank you. When I got your email, and then that's when I went and checked at the results after. I didn't even realize.
Yeah, I feel like nobody expects themselves to do well with picks, so you don't even look
exactly.
at the standings for these kind of things. But I do know we had fans on last year a bunch to like make picks each week, and we like to have them tell us their origin story as a Jets fan. So to give us your background, how did you become a Jets fan, and why have you suffered this long as one?
Yeah, so I was a young, naive 6-year-old kid back in 1998. And so I guess I'm a contrarian of sorts. My dad got me into sports, but he wasn't a football fan. He did basketball and baseball, and he's a Mets and Nets fan, and I became a Yankees and Knicks fan. And so a lot of the kids at school were all Giants fans. So continuing the contrarian ways, I and picked the green over the blue. And then Curtis Martin, Keyshawn Johnson, Wayne Corbett, really those guys really kept me in, and then misery.
Set in. Have you gone to games? Have you gone to games with like your family?
I've been to, I think, only one in my life. I actually prefer watching on TV. I
know a lot of people like that. Yeah.
Yeah. The one game I did go to was against the Colts. Sam Darnold was a QB, and we dropped like 40 points on him or something. It was a bad year, obviously, but for whatever reason, left that day.
Hey, maybe you're the good luck charm. You should go back. Yeah.
Shit.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about this week's games as I jump over to that part of things here. Last night, obviously, as you see, my picks obviously already struggling as the Bears came through and not just covered, but easily beat the Redskins up on the road, which is surprising. But overall, when you look at this week's game, anything sticking out to you, Gurman, that we should basically cheat off your sheet considering how well you're doing?
So my favorite play would be the Chiefs -3.5. I just don't think the Vikings D has been that great so far. And then Mahomes, I don't think he's going to have back-to-back subpar games. I think they should easily be able to win by at least 4. I don't see a repeat performance of what he did against the Jets, throwing up some lollipops. Should have been 4 interceptions, and it was only like 2. But yeah, so I really like the Chiefs offense, and a lot of them were really internally upset too, from what I read, that on how they performed, even though they won. So I could see them going for the kill there.
How are you feeling about this Jets Broncos game as a fan?
So I'm always a homer with that stuff. So I got to take the Jets 2.5. I do think it'll be a close game. I know a lot of people, for whatever reason, are thinking that the Jets could blow them out, but I do think it'll be a tight game. Hopefully we do pull it off. I think it'll be close. As mentioned, the Broncos defense is getting healthier, it appears. So that is a concern. So it shouldn't be as terrible as they've been, but the confidence that hopefully Zach can bring in, and even Hackett can bring in for them, and all the receivers probably putting in a little extra effort, knowing that, hey, we might actually get the ball now. I hope that helps. So I would take the Jets. Hopefully we can pull out a win and unleash Breece Hall.
There you go.
I was actually surprised the Jets were 2.5-point underdogs in this game, just because Zach played last week well, and it's been rougher for the Broncos in a lot of ways. I thought it would be closer to even, especially because I feel like they're playing into the Jets fan base who would jump on it. So I took the Jets because I was pleasantly surprised by the spread. I got the Chiefs as well. There's not like the big, like last week we had the Bills Dolphins game, which stood out, I think, as like a real big game. That's kind of lacking a little bit this week on the schedule. It's kind of a down week in the NFL. I guess the big one is the Niners and the Cowboys.
Yeah.
As the big game of the week. I have the Niners in that one staying undefeated at home -3.5. I guess we'll find out, Zach, if the struggles of the Cowboys a week ago was real or just because they were so banged up on the O-line.
I did pick the Cowboys just because it seems like most of these weeks, anytime something feels like it's what will definitely happen, like a team has a bad week. So I'm just, maybe the 49ers have their bad week this week is the only reason I have that one. A game that I'm weirdly intrigued by is the Texans-Falcons, because the Texans have kind of looked sneaky good. And the Falcons have had their ups and downs, but I picked the Texans in that one. And I also like let's see, which one did I look? Oh, actually, I picked the Rams to upset the Eagles, actually. The Eagles have been sloppy. They don't have Fletcher Cox, I think, this week. The Rams have been better than I expect. I think Cooper Kupp's coming back, and the Eagles' secondary has been kind of rough. So I picked an upset there. So there you go.
Yeah, I did the same thing. And the same with the Texans, too. I feel like I don't know why the Texans look decent, but they do, and they've won a couple of games, and I think Atlanta's coming back from playing in overseas, and I think Houston gets that one. So we're in sync on a lot of these this week. All right, it'll be interesting. Of course, the picks always brought to you by BetMGM, our partner here at The Athletic. Gurman, you got a score for the Jets game? What do you think?
Oof. Let's go 21-20. Nail biter.
I like it.
Ooh, okay. Zach?
Yeah, man, I feel like the Jets can win this one by a decent amount, but I don't have the confidence that they will. So I'll say Jets 24, Broncos 21.
I was going to say 24-17. So we're all going with the Jets. So
I'll take any of those.
Yeah, a win's a win.
That's probably not good though that we're all taking. Gurman, thanks for coming on, man. We appreciate it. Good luck with the picks the rest of the way. We have said that whoever wins this thing, there will be a prize at the end. I couldn't.
We haven't figured out what. We'll figure that out between now and then. Yes.
Yeah, and don't expect it to be lucrative in any way, but there will be something.
Honestly, it was just fun coming on. So thanks for having me.
Yeah,
guys.
thanks for coming on.
All right, man. Thank you. Thanks for coming on. All right, Zach. Any final thoughts here? Is anything we missed on the show?
I feel like we hit. I mean, I just mentioned they've been hyping up Quincy Williams quite a bit this week, and he deserves it. He's played very well. Jeff Wilberg thinks he's the best linebacker in football. Robert Saleh told a cool story about how he wanted to draft Quincy when he was in San Francisco. He was projected as a day 3 guy, and the Jaguars picked him in the 3rd round. They cut him. Jets claimed him on waivers, kind of developed him in the way that they did. Great example of a guy that if you're just patient with, he has all the tools. A lot of times teams aren't patient with these guys. So that's worth shouting out. Tony Adams should be back this week. Didn't mention that. I kind of alluded to it earlier. Saleh said today that they've talked to AVT about staying at right tackle permanently, which is notable both for his future and because of what it means about if and when Dwayne Brown comes back. Like there's been questions about whether they would give him back a starting job. I feel like if AVT's staying at right tackle, that's less likely because I think Makai's at least earned a chance to stay in the lineup. Yeah, and then I'm excited for Denver because Denver's one of my favorite cities. I've been there a bunch. Samantha is coming with me, so we're gonna go on some fun hikes. Maybe check out.
Is that the first work? Is that the first work trip together?
Yeah, first one she's joining me with. I know Bree used to go with Connor a lot.
All these milestones.
I know, right? Yeah, we're hitting all of them. Great food city. I'm excited to hit some of the food spots. If any Jets fans, if any Can't Wait listeners are going to be out there, you should let us know. I love running into Can't Wait listeners on the road. It happens quite a bit. It happened in in Dallas. Happens at the airport a lot. I have early ass flight tomorrow, which I'm not thrilled about. But yeah, so if any of you guys are going to Denver, let me know. Love running into you guys. But yeah, I'm hoping. I'm not supposed to hope for anything. I am hoping for a win because another like just long season. I don't really want to deal with that. Like, get the win, get through the Eagles game, get to the bye, and then the schedule eases up after that. And I think they can win, and I hope they do.
I think they do too. I think they do. I think we're going to have like some hope here. 2-3. I mean, the difference between 2-3 and 1-4 is
huge. It feels like
1-4 season's over, right? Like basically.
And that's the funny part why I've tried not to go too extreme with the Zach Wilson stuff, because if he's bad against the Broncos, like all the praise that just happened, it's going to go the complete opposite way, and you're going to start hearing all the radio people again. Like, everybody needs to breathe on the week to week like freakouts. Even if, some of it, like I got some, like, okay, it was over the top after last week, after the Patriots game, but Zach was very bad in that game. So, and Zach was good in this game, but I think it's like a relative thing. Like, he was good relative to the rest of his career so far. I wouldn't crown him yet. I wouldn't say, he's for sure going to lead them in the playoffs, anything like that. I just think we all need to take a breath, see how this Broncos game goes. And then if he's good again against the Broncos, then I think we can start feeling good about the rest of the season. And if he's bad, then we can start feeling like, uh-oh.
I think I actually had them 2-3 through 5 games,
but for different
reasons, completely different, because of the schedule and not because of terrible quarterback play. But I think that's actually how I had, and then 11-6 is how I had them finishing up. So like,
I'm less confident in that. I'm less confident in the win total that we had.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think 9-8 would be pretty great, and maybe
arguably Robert Saleh would deserve some love coaching wise if that happens. Honestly.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That, and then everybody comes back in that case, and hopefully with healthy. The thing is, like, with this Aaron Rodgers, we didn't touch on the fact that Aaron Rodgers. We'll just keep going here. At the end of the show, that Aaron Rodgers really seems to think he can play this season if this team can make the playoffs. But that's kind of fascinating to me, because like, if this team suddenly goes 10-7 and makes the playoffs, and Aaron Rodgers says, "I'm ready to go," like, we'd assume if they're 10-7, Zach Wilson has played pretty good football. Like,
I know that's it's a lot of hype. It's enough hypotheticals that
part of me can't wait. Part of me can't wait for that possibility, right?
Can't wait. Yeah.
What a mess that would be. Like, Aaron's like, "I'm ready to go," and the team's like, "Well, Zach's kind of taken us this far." Like,
yeah, it's funny. Connor tried asking Saleh that, like, which obviously has like 4 different hypotheticals embedded in the question. Like, Rodgers saying how he's coming back, but if he comes back, that means you're in the playoff contention. If you're in playoff contention, that means Zach's playing well. And then what do you do? And Saleh's like,
no chance.
That's a good problem to have. Yeah. Exactly. So ultimately, that is a great problem to have. But that'd be fascinating. So, and because it's a wild scenario, it's probably, I wouldn't be surprised if it happened, almost just because the weirdest things are going to happen here at all times.
Yeah, I just can't imagine Rodgers being ready to go at any point.
Yeah, no, I'm skeptical about that, to say the least. But as he keeps telling everybody, you doubt him is when he's at his best. So if he comes back, you can say I'm the reason if you guys want.
That's fine. Sure. Let's blame you. All right. That's been a good episode. Thanks everybody for joining us. If you checked us out live on YouTube, thanks for watching, or on the podcast. Definitely spread the word to your friends to check out the Can't Wait podcast. We'll be back with everybody early next week with the full recap of the Broncos game.